Good afternoon. Thank you very much. My beloved faculty members here at NTU, I'm Chen Hao Chu from Linguistics, and I'm also serving as Assistant Director of Center for Bilingual Education. I would like to welcome you to come over here for this session today, and I'm very happy to see some familiar faces and some new faces, and as always, we'll be here to serve. And as when you guys came in, you actually probably got the brochure from the structure and the about us, and there will be a lot of tasks we're working on, the services we're providing, the subsidy we're providing, and please, by all means, let us know if you have any questions and if you would like to know more about what we're doing here at CBE and what kind of EMI implementation we're looking for here on the campus, across the campus. So today, it's not about CBE, the services and all that. We'll be enjoying the sharing sessions led by Professor张心瑜from 外文系. And Sin-Yi Chang, she received her PhD program from Cambridge University, and her research focuses on EMI and language policy as well as bilingual education, and also the higher education internalization. So we're very happy to have her here. The topic is right on, and this is a perfect topic for everybody here, to get a mindset, to get the preparation. And without further ado, let's welcome Dr. Chang.
Good afternoon, everyone. So thank you very much to Professor Chiu for that very nice introduction, and thank you very much to the Center for Bilingual Education for inviting me here today to this EMI sharing session. As shared by Professor Chiu, my name is Sin-Yi Chang. I'm a newly appointed assistant professor in the Department of Foreign Languages and Literatures. And today I stand here with trepidation as I speak to a large group of professors that I believe have much more experience than I do. And actually some of the professors have been my own 老师 back then when I was a student in NTU. I'm also very grateful for a lot of colleagues and friends being here to support me. So thank you very much. Thank you everyone for being here. I hope this session will be somewhat useful to you in different ways. And by the end of this hour, you all have something to take away. Okay? So a little bit more about myself. Usually at the very beginning of my talks at different workshops, I kind of would start with a short story of what motivated me to go into this research on English medium instruction. So before I did my PhD in Cambridge, I was a secondary school English language teacher in Taipei. I taught in Shipai Guozhong for 4 years. So back 10 years ago, when I was a teacher candidate preparing for the teacher's qualification exams, a lot of us were told that we are expected to teach entirely in English in the 15-minute teaching demonstration. Back then, I didn't really question why I had to do so. I basically just followed what I was told, went on stage to do my teaching demonstration entirely in English, and I passed the exam and became a teacher the same year. However, since then, I have never ever taught a class entirely in English to any secondary school until even right. Good question. But also in NTU, my classes, I teach sophomore composition and a teacher training course for students who want to be English teachers in secondary school in the future. I don't label my class as EMI because I still use Chinese, as there are lots of important policy documents from Taiwan that I think are very relevant to them, and I don't want to stick to the policy too strictly because I want my students to get what is valuable to them in the longer run. So this kind of sets the tone for today's presentation. Anyway, so that's a little bit about my background story. For those of you who have attended my other talks in the past, probably you've heard this story before, so please bear with me. The title of today's presentation is English Medium Instruction for Whom and for What? Rethinking the relationship between language, pedagogy, and the politics of knowledge. So I created this title before knowing that today is supposed to be more about sharing my EMI experience. So in the past few days, I've tried my best to kind of make this very heavy topic into something potentially more interactive, okay? So let's see how it goes. Now, the first slide that I would like to share with you, if the screen over here, it's hard to read the words, then probably you can check out the screens next to your table. So the first slide I would like to share with you over here is the definition of EMI provided by the Ministry of Education in Taiwan, okay? The text is in Chinese, so I'll do an oral English translation and summary very quickly later, just to set the foundation of what we will be discussing in the next hour, okay? So this definition can be found in this document called the BEST program, Key Cultivation School. BEST stands for Bilingual Education for Students in College, okay? I suppose most of us know that NTU is one of the 4 universities that have received flagship status under the BEST program, which is a program designed specifically for higher education under the 2030 bilingual policy. This document was made publicly available since last July, okay? So let us have a look at the definition of EMI over here. On the very top, the parts that are highlighted in blue says that basically EMI is a type of course that we see in non-English speaking institutions, okay? This course basically is entirely conducted in English, not just the oral instruction, interaction, teaching materials, and also assessment. And the definition emphasizes that it has to be 100% in English. Now, there are several other points that are provided to add some nuance to the definition, okay? The first one basically says that EMI is not for teaching language, okay? So it is different from EAP or ESB, which stands for English for Academic Purposes, or English for Specific Purposes, respectively, okay? However, EAP and ESP courses are still important as they help prepare students to participate in EMI courses in the future if they choose to select EMI courses. Point 2 basically reiterates what is written in the definition and emphasizing the 100%. Point 3 and point 4 basically is kind of like a tug of war, saying that actually you can use some Chinese in situations if you want your students to brainstorm ideas or if you want to stimulate their creativity. However, it is best that professors still try their best to maintain their classroom communication at 70% English. The 5th point basically says that high quality EMI would usually involve encouraging the students to speak and write in English. So this is how the Ministry of Education understands EMI. Now, we will move on to some reflection and discussion. So here I have 10 scenarios listed for you to think about. These scenarios are often heard and seen from EMI classes, basically. So let me just walk you through the prompt and the 10 scenarios, okay? So the prompt is this: your course is labeled as EMI. What would you do in these scenarios, okay? Scenario 1, you are creating your syllabus. There is a pedagogically relevant text or piece of material that you would like to include. However, it is not in English. Are you going to include it? Scenario 2, the semester starts. A student asks if he or she can sign up to your course because he or she wants to learn English from you. Is that a sufficient justification? Scenario 3, one day a student raises a question in Chinese during a whole class discussion. What should you do in your EMI class? Scenario 4, the class discussion continues. You call on a student to explain his or her idea. Halfway into the explanation, the student asks if he or she can switch to Chinese as it makes his or her point clear. Okay, would you allow this? Scenario 5, it is week 5. You realize most groups talk in their home language during group discussion. What do you think about this? Scenario 6, your students have completed their take-home midterm paper. You find it difficult to understand what they have written in English. I think sometimes we even don't really understand what our students are writing in their Chinese. But imagine if it's in English, okay? Scenario 7, you then realize some of them use Google Translate for their midterm paper. What to do now? Scenario 8, one student complains about your accent in your midterm evaluation. This is super uncomfortable, okay? Would you intervene or would you just ignore it? Scenario 9, later in the semester, your students ask if they can respond to the final exam questions in Chinese. Okay, would you allow it? And finally, in the end of term evaluation, several students expressed that they could not understand the EMI course, okay? These are scenarios that I have encountered in teaching and scenarios that a lot of my research participants shared with me when I did my PhD fieldwork. So I think we can have 10 minutes to kind of think about what you would do and discuss quickly with your neighbors at the same table. And later on, we can all come back to share what each group thinks about these 10 scenarios, okay? And if you find all of these 10 scenarios are too overwhelming, you can also just focus on 3 to 5. That is completely fine as well. Is that good? Any questions so far? Of course, any language that would facilitate discussion. Any language that could facilitate discussion, okay? Thank you. So we will come back at 8 to 1. Is that good? 10 minutes, okay? Okay, because of time constraints, we probably will have to end the group discussion here, but continue the whole class workshop discussion together, okay? So I was thinking, instead of going group by group, how about let's go point by point or scenario by scenario. And if any group has any like immediate response or very interesting comments that you would like to share, please share with everyone. Please share with us. I'd love to hear what you think about these different scenarios and how you would respond, okay? So let's start with the first scenario. You're creating your syllabus. Sorry for the typo. Syllabus over here. There is a pedagogically relevant text or piece of material that you would like to include. However, it is not in English. What would you do? Would any group like to share your answers? Oh, okay, thank you.
Hi, should I stand up? Hi, I'm Ruby Huang from School of Medicine. So I recently have a course on period. It's a general education course. So the way we conduct it is the first semester was in Chinese, and this semester we're doing in English. And one of our key lecturer, he couldn't deliver in English because he's a 业师 from the industry. So actually it's very difficult to force him to conduct in non-Chinese lectures. So what we chose to do was to engage into an interpreter service in Taida, our translation master program, which was a very, very unique experience. But the feedback from our class, from the student, was because they can understand both languages, so it takes up the time to run the content. So some students actually feedback that they like it, they can understand better, but it's a waste of the time, and they actually want to challenge themselves for full English engagement. So this is the experience that we have just happened like 2 weeks ago.
Right. That's very interesting. May I ask if there are international students in your class?
Yes, there are. I think we can only tell from their nationality, right? Mm-hmm. Because it's labeled. There are 5 at the moment.
Right. Okay.
So the class size is about 110.
Sure.
So they are the really minority.
Okay.
But however, the menstrual class, the period class, one key message is be inclusive.
Right.
And to embrace diversity. So this is one key point I want to teach the students as well.
Exactly.
That even when you only have a minority that is, cannot understand Chinese, we have to cater to their need because this is the way I want to push forward the period education.
Exactly. I think the emphasis on diversity and inclusiveness is very important. And even though they are the minority, they still deserve to understand what the invited lecturer is saying. And having an interpreter is a very sensitive solution in this scenario. Thank you.
Hi, so actually we are trying to find a solution, but we don't have the satisfactory solution. So we will try to see how we can compromise, not really compromise, how we can fulfill everyone, even the minority. But still, I mean, the feedback is not like, oh, that's great, let's do it. No, it's probably not in that direction what we want.
Sure. I think when it comes to making very public decisions, there's always diverse feedback, and it is actually quite natural. And we're also trying to figure out what works along the way. But I think this strategy is a good start. Yes. Would any group? Okay. Thank you, Professor Chang.
Okay, thank you very much for mentioning the interpreting service. Yeah, because yes, I'm from the I'm a supporting teacher in the translation and interpretation program, and what you have been saying is like it seems like you are using consecutive interpreting, so the speaker have to pause before the interpreter can interpret. But we also have simultaneous interpreting, so if you ever need to invite a Chinese speaker in your class, then it's possible to provide simultaneous interpreting. And the speaker can speak Chinese and our students will interpret into English. And so that the audience can practice their listening comprehension as well.
Actually, the lecturer and the interpreter actually communicated about the choice prior to the class. They actually engaged each other, and then the lecturer preferred the way we did it is like is instead of having the simultaneous interpretation, yeah, because he doesn't want his thought to be, no, that's his preference. So that is kind of like the choice of the lecturer, yeah. Yeah, I know.
To do it simultaneously.
Yeah. I know, and you guys can rent the earphone. Yeah,
yes.
I know.
But
it's perfect service. We're very happy about that. Yeah.
Thank you. I almost forgot that, yes, we have an expert in translation and interpretation over here. So yeah, a lot of resources. I think it counts. The Ministry of Education, I don't know, but later I'll say more about their definition. How about, well, we don't have a lot of time, so let's move on to the second scenario. The semester starts, a student asks if he or she can sign up to your course because he or she wants to learn English. What do you feel about this? I think for language department, this is completely a legitimate reason to sign up for a course. But for non-language departments, how do you feel about this if a student comes up to you and say this to you? Okay, thank you.
Hi, I'm Steven from the Department of Agronomy. So basically for those kind of scenario, we just will be honest with them, say, this class is not an English class. We meant to teach other type of stuff. Learning English to me is always like kind of like a byproduct of EMI. Maybe we focus on 80-90% of our time, energy on focus on the academic or professional materials. English is kind of bonus, extra 20%.
Right.
I know they add up to 100, but sure. Then if a student understand that and they still want to engage with this class, sure, let them be. But if you realize that and they think if they want to learn English, nothing else, and they probably will fail this class, they probably will decide to drop that.
Right. Thank you very much for sharing your thoughts, because this is actually what a lot of the international literature is saying. Most of the content professors around the world don't think EMI is for teaching language. Okay, so whatever policy imposition that says that EMI is for teaching language, this actually goes against what a lot of professors on the ground are thinking. Okay, thank you very much. Any further comments? Okay, scenario 3. One day a student raises a question in Chinese during a whole class discussion. How would you respond to this? Speak English, or you respond in English, or you translate in English. Any solution?
Yeah, because like the definition of EMI from the Ministry of Education is like you have to keep 70% as English, right? So, I mean, because they ask questions in Mandarin, and there must be a reason, probably their English is not good enough or whatsoever, and you cannot improve right away. So at least for me, I would just let them go with like this. Mm-hmm. And then we have the class, the graduate student class, but some of the students will ask questions in Mandarin. Mm-hmm. So what I do is I will do the translation by myself, and then let everything go as what it is. So I will not force the student to repeat the question in English, but instead I will do the translation by myself. Sort of like save time, but also like, okay, we have like 30% flexibility that can still do in Mandarin. That's what I would do.
I think that's a very clever way out. And it also keeps your course, your instruction focused on teaching your subject knowledge instead of diverting too much to English itself. Okay, thank you very much for sharing how you would approach this scenario. For scenario 4 and 5, I think we can discuss it together. If a student explains something and then suddenly ask if they could switch to Chinese, what would you do? If students in group discussion discuss in their home languages, would you stop them or you would just let it be? You let it be? How about for language professors?
Well, I will often encourage them to remember that when we resume class, they will have to express their ideas in English, so it's good to practice. But also, I changed my mind about this the first year when I realized some of the students in class I thought were Taiwanese were actually from Macau. And so, being Cantonese speakers, they were having a hard time following along. And I think one of the benefits of EMI is that it makes an international classroom, and so I wouldn't want to compromise that.
Yes, so I think what Lilith is saying is that if there are students who don't really understand Chinese, then we also want to make that space inclusive for them, like what the professor here said as well. So navigating like the linguistic space in a classroom is actually not that easy, and I am not here today to provide a very simple solution either. These are just some thoughts to kind of guide your thinking. So for scenarios 6 and 7, I think we can discuss these two together. So if you have a take-home assignment and you find it very difficult to understand what the students have written in English, okay, and then you realize they use Google Translate, how would you create your next assignment then? Any group? Or when you're grading your students' English assignment, do you pick their language? Would you correct their English? No. Okay. Any group? Or probably people have an answer inside already, but not so sure whether we could share it publicly. Okay, that's fine. Let's move on to question 8 then. I think we can discuss this itself. A student complains about your accent in your evaluation. Should you take this seriously? Should you intervene? For accents.
Can I jump?
Yeah, go ahead.
I feel bad
please.
because if I'm taking the microphone, I feel bad I'm taking the time from our fellows over
okay.
here. What I did for my class is I set the ground at the beginning of the semester. This is actually the tips that I learned from one of the professors we invited earlier on. She said that when you go to the EMI class, at the beginning of the semester, you set the tone. You tell them this is what you should expect for an EMI class. This is what you not expect for the EMI class. Say, for example, I'm not a native speaker of English, so don't pick on my accent, don't pick on my errors. So once everybody's agreed, sort of have this kind of contract, then everybody will be very happy for the rest of the semester. Right. And I think this is what I did for my class. So I say, I'm here to teach the content. I'm not here to teach you how to improve your language. So don't expect that your TOEFL score will go all the way high up. No, this is not going to happen. So this is what I did. Yeah.
Right, right. I think setting the ground rules very clearly in the beginning of the semester is very important, right? So in our field, in English language teaching, it is very much emphasized right now that accent is something that someone uses to express their identity. So that is why it triggers a lot of political issues and makes people very uncomfortable if someone tries to correct their accent or say that you don't sound like a native speaker. Now, pronunciation is slightly different. Some students actually might be talking about pronunciation because they have difficulty understanding you. So if it's really pronunciation, then probably in our own time, we can spend some time working on it. But overall, the message that I give to my ELT, English language teaching students who want to be language teachers in the future is that instead of asking someone to sound like a native speaker, sometimes we have to try our best to train ourselves to understand non-native English speakers. So this is the attitude and the kind of disposition to go forward, okay? So yes, please.
Share a kind of like interesting finding, because in the period class, we emphasize on inclusiveness a lot.
Right.
So actually, we have several videos from different people talking in different accents to talk about the same issues. So I think I show one clip in Australian English, one clip in British English, and we'll be watching a movie heavily in Indian English. So, I think another way is to subtly introduce this, diversity, inclusive concept into the classroom. Because I think we probably also need to teach the students in NTU is an international campus. You would have people speaking in different accents.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. I think this is what secondary school language teaching is trying to do as well. Like when students practice their listening comprehensions, don't just play speakers who are speaking British accent, Australian accent, or American accent. Also try to play speakers who are speaking in different accents as well. Because in fact, not just at NTU is an international campus, but around the globe, most of the English speakers are not native English speakers. So if we think about it that way, actually learn how to understand people speaking with different accents instead of forcing people to say or speak in a native accent. And what counts as native, right? So that is also very contested as well. Point 9 and point 10, okay, scenario 9 and 10. Later in the semester, a student asks if they can respond to the final exam question in Chinese. I think this is very similar to the scenario that was mentioned earlier in scenario 6. So probably we'll skip this for now. And scenario 10, in the end of terms of evaluation, if students do say that they don't understand your EMI course and you offer a one-year course, what would you do? What would you recommend them? Any group? I'd love to hear what you think. Yes, James. Oh, okay. How about one student? You'll just ignore it, right? And many students? How about the case for if it's many students? It's a difficult situation, right? So in international literature, what is the English level of students? What is the expected English level of students to take EMI courses? B2, right? CEFR B2. So I would say, I would probably check the students' English level. If they haven't reached CEFR B2, then I would say you probably need to go back to take courses from the Department of Foreign Languages and Literature to build up your foundation. But if your level is above B2, then I would say probably you can incorporate some degrees of language. I probably wouldn't call it language teaching, but you can raise their awareness of, there's a term called disciplinary literacy. What are the types of English used in your discipline to communicate and construct knowledge? So you can start moving the language part to a more advanced level. But if they haven't reached this level, they have to go back to language courses. James, sorry, you wanted to add something.
Sorry for my ignorance. So what is B2 stands for? Maybe TOEFL or IB or I mean 多益 something. What is the level that corresponding to that?
There's actually a grid, and I think if you Google it,
TOEFL 80 is B2.
Oh, okay.
Around that, okay, which I think a lot of students will pass.
So there are lots of these rubrics that you can find online, like IELTS, TOEFL, GEPT, all of these international tests. Of course, they're slightly different, but you can use it as a reference. Okay?
So we follow up on that. So it's kind of related to question 2.
Right.
If students come to say, I want to sign up to your class, and you find out their English actually is below that bar,
right.
Will you recommend them not to sign up? Or is like, sure, go for it. Give yourself some challenge.
I think, of course, we can say they can give it a try, but we probably have to warn them of what could happen later. And whatever happens later, we probably have to deal with a lot of the consequences too. So I think what is easier for us and what is more beneficial for them is to ask them to take foundational language courses. Yeah. Okay. Any other comments that you would like to share right now before I move on? Yes, James?
I'm teaching economics course, and so a lot of it is mathematics. I feel more like that this EMI thing is, I mean, the English is just like the math in my class. So if the student come in and say they don't really have the basic math level they require to take this course, I will tell them that you should take some other, maybe like calculus for first year, something like that. and then come back to my course. And so you're basically suggesting that we should tell them to get some English level first and then come back to the EMI course.
Right. Because I suppose like for your own subject discipline, there's some kind of sequence, right? For language learning, it's the same. Okay. Of course, they can challenge themselves. You can let them do the trial and error, and then they probably will find out they have to actually do more groundwork. Thank you.
Thanks.
Can I have a question following James? What if your course is general education course? There's no more introductory to your own course. What do they do? What should we do? You know what I mean? If there's, say, for example, economics 101, then of course they can go back to take that 101. But say if it's introduction courses already, there's no other choices. What should we do as an instructor?
So in the EMI literature, there are different models to provide this language support. There's like what I was talking about was probably more like the preparatory model. So in several countries that have EMI campuses, before the students enroll in the program, or immediately after they enroll, they have to attend intensive EAP and ESP courses in the summertime. So that's like the preparatory model. And there's also the concurrent model. So even though they probably will have to learn the content or take content courses first, they learn the language along the way. And these are the two most common models that we see in literature. Any further comments or questions? Okay, I'll move on to the more boring part later, which is my research. Okay. But I think this is very interesting because honestly, when I did my PhD study and came back to Taiwan, I did feel a discrepancy between how the international literature understands EMI and how the Ministry of Education understands it, okay? So here I would like to share with you a very widely cited definition, research definition of EMI. This definition can be found in Maccaro's book called English Medium Instruction, published in 2018. Maccaro is an emeritus professor in the University of Oxford. He has done extensive research on EMI and still doing a lot of research on this topic right now. And they have an Oxford EMI team that is producing a lot of work, okay? So Maccaro defines EMI as the use of the English language to teach academic subjects other than English itself in countries or jurisdictions where the first language of the majority of the population is not English, okay? A lot of the definitions that come afterwards share many similarities with Maccaro. For example, Pecorari and Malmstrom in their special issue on EMI, published in TESOL Quarterly in 2018, they listed 4 characteristics. The first one, English is the language used for instructional purposes. The second one, English is not itself the subject being taught. The third one, language development is not a primary intended outcome. And the fourth one, for most participants in the setting, English is a second language. Okay? So this is the research definition of EMI. Let us go back to have a look at the Ministry of Education's definition. Okay? Let's just focus on the blue part. So the first half of the definition says that EMI is a type of course that you find in non-English speaking institutions. So we do see kind of Maccaro's definition and also what Pecorari and Malmstrom have said, right? It is a type of teaching that we see in countries or jurisdictions where the population see English, most likely not the L1, or like what Pecorari and Malmstrom say, for most of the participants, it is in the setting, English is a second language, all right? So the first half of the definition, there is research support, but the second half that emphasizes 100% in English, there is no research support, okay? So far, basically, if you have a look in international literature, there's no one who says that EMI is 100% in English, okay? This 70% also, there's no research proof. Now, academics in the field have very mixed feelings about EMI. Philipson, who writes extensively on linguistic imperialism, in 2009 calls EMI a pandemic. Chappell in 2015 described EMI as a galloping trend, okay? And Maccaro, he uses the metaphor an unstoppable train to kind of express his concern for the fast expansion of EMI, because he's seeing a lot of policymakers not really taking what the research is telling them seriously, okay? My PhD research was analyzed with 2 theoretical frameworks. So for those of you in language education, you probably would know that the tension between content and language are often discussed in bilingual education. Is it language? Is it content? How do we deal with the relationship between the two? So I was also interested in looking at these two aspects in EMI. I used two theories. One is from Bernstein's Sociology of Knowledge, and one is from Spolsky's Language Policy Theory. Okay? Because today's workshop is more practical, I won't go further with into this theory. So just to give you an overall idea of the research design, my research questions were these. How does EMI policy influence curriculum planning, teaching, and learning within the higher education pedagogic device? The concept of the pedagogic device comes from Bernstein's Sociology of Knowledge. And the second question is, what are the changing faces of language and content under such policy influence? The study was framed as an ethnographically inspired multi-case study, okay? And I did my research in one university in Taiwan that has an institutional policy that defines the E in EMI as English only. The participants included 17 university lectures across disciplinary contexts. That is the reason why I called it a multi-case study, with 38 students and 6 administrators and policymakers. The administrators also include the vice chancellor of the university, some department heads, and also lower levels of administrators who are responsible for implementing or creating the conditions for implementing the EMI policy. Data collection methods encompass document analysis, classroom observations, semi-structured interviews, and focus group interviews. And this amounted to approximately 75 hours of audio data collected over 2 semesters. Okay, enough said. Because of time constraints, I will just share with you parts of my findings I feel would be relevant to you. So this is the outcome of the classes that I observed. This bar chart shows the proportion of English and Chinese used in the lectures or professors' oral instructions, okay? On the left-hand side are the course names, the courses that I observed. They span from the natural sciences, social sciences, all the way to the arts and the humanities. The bottom part shows the percentage. The parts that are highlighted in a lighter blue color refer to English. The parts that are highlighted in a darker blue color refer to Chinese. How was this percentage calculated? So I was quite fortunate to get the chance to audio record all of my observations. The professors were very kind to allow me to do so. They gave me consent. So after I observed all the classes, I played the audio recording, and every 5 seconds, I recorded the language I heard. And this is how I calculated the percentages of language used in these classes. So as you can see over here, except for polymeric materials and Russian history, most of the classes were conducted above 90% in English. And almost half of the classes were conducted entirely in English. This is the oral instruction part, okay? 3 years ago, I shared this bar chart at a conference in Canada. There was a Taiwanese academic who was there too, and she raised her hand and said that she doesn't really think that professors can do so well under the EMI policy. And I said, well, this shows that the English-only definition of the EMI policy has a very strong influence of what happens on the ground. It is controlling what lectures or what professors can do and cannot do. So it shows the influence of the policy control, okay? But I also wanted to ask that, does a successful EMI policy necessarily translate to a successful education, okay? Now, if we kind of unpack the word medium in EMI, when we teach, we don't just teach through oral instruction. There are other kinds of mediums, like teaching materials, classroom interaction, and the ways that we assess our students. So after my observations, I also got to interview the professors and read their syllabus and interview their students. So as you can see over here, if we have a look at the teaching materials interaction assessment, actually Chinese and other languages appeared quite frequently, or more frequently than what we would expect under the English-only EMI policy. For example, in the teaching materials, some professors do include like some Chinese textbooks, text, or add Chinese annotations after some English key terminology. Some professors do play videos in different languages, but they will do a voiceover in English. That's how they kind of found a way out to this situation. For classroom interaction, like what we discussed, oftentimes the students will speak in Chinese. Some professors would stop this. Some professors would allow this. So there are different approaches toward what you can do. As for assessment, okay, so you can see most of the questions were written in English. However, some professors did not require the students to respond in English. Some professors did. And those who did, some would pick on their language, some won't. There are also professors who do see the negative influence of asking students to write in English, okay? And they feel the students would not be able to express themselves that clearly. So they changed their open exam questions to multiple choice question and fill in the blanks. This might be a solution under the EMI policy, but I think for content professors, you would think that whether this is the right way to go forward too. If you're simplifying the content knowledge to multiple choice questions and fill in the blanks, okay? Now, what are the instructional outcomes of EMI? I'll just quickly go through this. So one of the main issues that a lot of the professors said is that they find in EMI, they're teaching less content. For example, the content they can cover in EMI classes usually is half of the amount that they could do in Chinese courses. And this is often because of the students' restricted English proficiency, so they often found themselves repeating themselves or had to slow down their instruction. The second most frequently identified issue is that the professor said that they're teaching simplified content in EMI courses. And this could partly be because of the professors, stem from the professor's side. For example, some of them say that they're more used to speaking in Chinese. So if they suddenly switch to English, they lose the nuance in their teaching. But a lot of it stems from the students again. For example, this professor from chemistry, he used a very interesting example. Polymers are composed of, something very simple to him. He says, if a student doesn't understand the verb composed of, then everything is destroyed, okay? And this is even much more of a challenge when it happens in real-time oral communication, okay? So what to do in these situations, okay? Now, there are also professors who think about the instructional outcomes not in terms of quantity or quality, but say that it's just different, okay? For example, this professor from public administration say that preparing courses in Chinese follows one logic, and preparing things in English follows another logic, okay? So it's completely different. This kind of also goes back to our field. We say that language kind of mediates our thought. So when we switch to another language, we might draw on different examples, different theories, and start to adopt different ways of looking at things. In the longer run, we might also consider or think about whether this would pose a threat to the intellectualization of our local languages, okay? Now, there are also some benefits, according to the professors, about EMI. For example, it creates opportunities for students to be immersed in English, okay? Some professors go out of the way to create more opportunities for the students to use English. For example, it's very interesting that this math professor says that in the first 2 weeks of the semester, he would actually train his students to do English self-introductions, which is considered a little bit unusual for a math class, okay? For this professor from the College of Management, he intentionally incorporates English news articles into the assignments and midterm exams. Okay? So he believes that this is a way to kind of push the students to practice English more. All right. All of this concern related to content knowledge and the potential benefits related to the learning of English reminds of this saying that was published in Hamid et al.'s article that was published in 2018. So he and his colleagues say that EMI may end up producing English-coded graduates with a shallow foundation of content knowledge in the longer run. Is this the type of education that we want to see in Taiwan? Is this the type of education that we want to see specifically in NTU? So just to reiterate, the English-only discourse, the outdatedness of this discourse, this is very widely known in our field. In fact, a few weeks ago in one of my courses, Practicum in English, my students and I came across this paragraph in Brown and Lee's textbook, Teaching by Principles. Basically, they say that in language teaching circles across the globe, there has historically been an undercurrent of opinion that claims that one should never use native languages in the classroom. Such convictions may stem from methods like the direct method, which endorse target language-only practices in the classroom, and from an overreaction to grammar translation methodology that often saw little use of the target language. It is now clear from research and experience that English-only prohibitions go too far. So students are reading this in the textbook. They know what is going on in research. But when they go into the field, when they see other policies calling it something else, they often become very confused, okay? The field TESOL bilingual education and second language acquisition not only rejects the English-only definition or discourse, in fact, the field is also going through a multilingual and translingual turn, or trying to push these concepts into practice, okay? So why are we doing something that is opposite to what the research is suggesting? Now, EMI for whom and for what? I've shared this language content spectrum several times already in other workshops, so this is just to let you know that EMI falls on the content end of the spectrum. EGP, EAP, and ESB is more language-oriented, okay? So basically on the left-hand side, language is a subject. On the right-hand side, language or English is the medium, okay? International students usually would see English as a medium. But if you have students in your class who are Taiwanese students, they probably would have a dual expectation. They want to learn content, and they probably also want to learn a little bit of English as well. And back to our discussion earlier, then it depends on what kind of English they want to learn. If it's very foundational English, then they should go to these courses on the left-hand side of the spectrum. Okay? If they're more advanced, then they can probably give EMI a try. All right? At the end of my thesis, I also proposed this dynamic language content model, which can be seen as a second generation of the language content spectrum. So why do I propose this? Because it shows a space, basically the third quadrant, quadrant 3, that does not exist in the language content continuum. In the language content continuum, we see in the middle, like CBI, Immersion, and CLIL, they have a dual focus to do both content and language. Who wouldn't want to do everything in the classroom, right? But in reality, what could happen? Quadrant 3 basically shows a space that suggests that little content and little language is actually delivered. This space does exist if you talk to professors. Okay, so this is just to raise our awareness that whatever we hope to do, there's another reality on the other side that we have to acknowledge. Okay? So this is the end of my talk today. These are just some key questions for you to take away if you are thinking about providing an EMI course, or if you are already doing so, you can also think about some of the more detailed issues related to language in your teaching. And thank you very much for coming here today. I find it really rewarding to hear your thoughts. And this is my first time giving a talk to professors in NTU. So thank you so much. Thank you.
定到1点半，但是也许我们还是有一点点的时间，我们开放给在场的老师们，如果老师们还有想要询问一下张老师一些问题的话，我们是不是还是可以 take 1 or 2 questions? If there's any questions from the floor.
I really enjoyed that, and even though I'm a language teacher, I had so many ideas listening to this.
Thank you.
One thing I wanted to ask you about was what you think of the use of TAs. So let's say we have a certain objective in the classroom for English medium. What about how TAs interact with the students and the possibilities there?
Sure. Actually, that was a question that the 教发中心, like the Teaching Development Center, actually asked me last year, because NTU is actually hiring a lot of EMI TAs, or TAs specifically for EMI. So I would say that probably, I guess one of the challenges for EMI professors is that they are not so sure whether the students are following the content, right? So that could be where the TAs could be helpful. So they probably can work in small groups. The TA can more frequently check on their learning comprehension and provide support, more immediate support, especially in a larger class. So that's my immediate response.